There's a photograph sitting on my phone right now. I took it without thinking, the way you take pictures of things you don't fully understand yet, on instinct, because something in your chest says remember this. It's a picture of a man standing completely still. That's it. That's the whole photograph. And I have looked at it every single day for 4 months. I need to back up. Last October, I was in London for a work conference that I did not want to attend. My company sends people to these things the way you send envelopes, stuffed, sealed, expected to arrive and not complain about the journey. I was the envelope. I arrived. I was not complaining. Loudly. The conference was in Westminster. 3 days of panels about supply chain optimization and the future of logistics, which is a sentence I can barely finish typing without my soul leaving my body briefly. On the second morning, I left the hotel at 6:47 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, because I never sleep well in hotel rooms, because the pillows are always slightly wrong in ways that are hard to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. It was cold. Not brutally cold London cold, which is a different thing. It's the kind of cold that comes with gray sky and damp air and the smell of old stone, and somehow it doesn't feel hostile, it just feels like the city is tired and asking you not to make too much noise. I walked without direction. Past a coffee cart I told myself I'd stop at on the way back. Past a red phone box with a crack running up one side. Past pigeons that were doing absolutely nothing and seemed proud of it. And then, almost without meaning to, I was standing at the edge of the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. I hadn't planned it. I wasn't a tourist, technically. I'd been to London twice before and done the palace on the first trip, the obligatory photograph with the fence, the guard in the distance, all of it. But this time there was almost nobody there. 6:40 something in the morning, midweek, October, and the space in front of that enormous building was nearly empty. A couple jogging together, earbuds in, not even glancing up. A man with a camera on a tripod who was clearly waiting for better light. A woman with a pushchair who looked like she'd been awake since the middle of last week. And the guard. He was standing at his post at the left gate. One of the sentry boxes. Bearskin hat, red tunic, the whole thing, though the light was gray enough that the red looked almost burgundy, almost like dried blood, which is a thought I had and then felt weird about having. I stopped. I don't know why I stopped. I've seen these guards before. Everyone has seen them in pictures if not in person, and when you see them in person they are exactly what you expected and somehow that makes them more uncanny, not less. Because you realize the thing that pictures don't prepare you for is the stillness. It's not the stillness of someone who has paused. It's the stillness of someone who has made a decision, repeatedly, every few seconds, to not move. There's effort in it. You can feel the effort from 30 feet away. I watched him for maybe 2 minutes before I noticed. His jaw was moving. Not speaking. Not mouthing words. Just the faintest, almost imperceptible movement. The kind of thing you'd only see in near silence, with almost no one around, in gray October light that flattened everything and made small things larger. He was grinding his teeth. His name was Daniel. I didn't know that yet. I wouldn't know it for another 40 minutes, and only because of what happened next. What happened next was this: a kid appeared. Not a small kid, maybe 14, 15. Wearing a gray school uniform but, with the tie loosened and the collar pulled open in the way kids wear school uniforms when they're trying to indicate they are not entirely the kind of person who wears school uniforms. He had headphones around his neck and a backpack that looked like it carried everything he owned. He'd come from the direction of the bus stop, walking fast, then slowing when he saw the guard. He stopped about 10 feet from the sentry box. He stared. The guard didn't move. Of course he didn't move. That's the whole point of the guard, that's the ancient performance of it, the immovability, the human-made monument, the person becomes symbol. The kid tilted his head. Then, he took a step closer. Then, another. He stopped just outside the line. There's always a line, sometimes painted, sometimes just understood, and he stood there, looking at the guard the way you look at something you're trying to figure out. Not mean. Not the way kids on TikTok try to make them laugh or break. This was something else. He was looking at the guard the way you look at a locked door when you're wondering what's behind it. "Does it hurt?" the kid said. Standing like that. Nobody says anything. I'm watching from maybe 25 feet away. I've fully stopped pretending I'm just passing through. The woman with the pushchair has also stopped, though I think for different reasons. The man with the tripod is entirely focused on his camera. I mean, the kid tried again, and then stopped himself. "Sorry. You can't answer." "I know." He stood there another few seconds. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He straightened up. Pulled his tie up. Fixed his collar. Then, he walked away. I stood there watching him go, trying to figure out what I'd just seen. And, it was in that moment of trying to figure it out that I noticed, for the first time, as if it had just appeared, though it must have been there the whole time, that the guard's jaw had stopped moving. I went in, got the coffee I'd promised myself. Came back, because there was nowhere else I particularly wanted to be. By the time I came back, there were more people. Not crowds, it was still early, but the thin, scattered morning crowd of joggers and dog walkers and people with coffee cups and tourists who'd set alarms to beat the rush. The light had shifted slightly. Still gray, but with a thin suggestion of something warmer behind it, the way London mornings sometimes negotiate with the sun over the course of 2 or 3 hours. The guard had been replaced. Different guard, same post, same position. You can't tell, that's the other thing pictures don't show you. You can't tell, standing at a distance, whether it's the same person or a different person. The uniform eats the individual. That's its entire function. But, the first guard, the jaw-clenching one, was now walking. 2 guards pass each other during the changeover and, for a moment the 2 of them are visible together, and then, one walks away toward the interior of the palace compound and disappears, and that's it. He's gone. Absorbed back in. I didn't plan what I did next. I want to be clear about that. I'm not the kind of person who approaches strangers, generally. I'm the kind of person who thinks about approaching strangers and, then, talks himself out of it and, then, thinks about it again later and, feels vaguely bad. But, something about the jaw. The grinding teeth. The stillness that had effort inside it. I walked. Not toward the palace, not toward his post, which would have been impossible anyway. Toward the side, toward where I'd seen him turn, toward the outer edge of the compound where there's a side gate that I'd noticed pedestrians use. I didn't know where he was going. I didn't know if I'd see him again. I did see him. He was standing near a wall, maybe 50 meters from the gate, and he had taken the bearskin hat off and was holding it under his arm, and he had his face tipped back toward the strip of sky you can see between buildings, and his eyes were closed. He was breathing. Just breathing. I almost didn't approach him. I stopped, I thought about it, I did the whole internal negotiation. Then, I thought about the jaw, and the kid with the loosened tie, and the stillness that had cost something. I said, "Excuse me." He opened his eyes and looked at me with the expression of someone who was used to being looked at and still hasn't gotten comfortable with it. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, which is the most English thing I've ever said in my life, and I am not English. I was watching, earlier. I don't mean that in a weird way. Is it always like that? He looked at me for a long moment. He was maybe 26. Dark circles under his eyes that weren't from one bad night but from a longer accumulation. The kind of face that would be easy and open if it were allowed to be. "Like what?" he said. "That hard," I said. He was quiet for a second. "It's the standing," he said, finally. "Most people think it's the," he gestured vaguely, and I understood he meant the tourists, the photos, the whole spectacle. "But, it's the standing. After 2 hours your knees do a thing. Your jaw was yeah." He didn't let me finish. "Yeah, I know." He put the hat back on. Even though he was off duty, or between duties, or whatever the correct term is, he put it back on like he decided something. "I nearly didn't re-enlist," he said. I didn't say anything. He wasn't talking to me, exactly. He was talking at the strip of sky. I had a place, up north. Near Harrogate. My dad's got a farm. Not a big one, doesn't make real money, but he stopped. It's something. It's a real thing. You can put your hands in it. Why did you re-enlist? I said. He looked at me then. Not with anger, but with the specific tired patience of someone who has been asked a question they can't fully answer. Because the form was there, he said. And I filled it in. That should not be as devastating a sentence as it is. But it landed in me like a stone in water, and I felt the ring spreading outward, and I stood there nodding, because what else do you do when someone tells you something true that they maybe didn't mean to tell you? Daniel, he said, and offered his hand. Omar, I said, and shook it. He put the hat back on properly. Adjusted the chin strap. Became the monument again, or started the process of becoming it, the way an actor walks back to their mark. The kid this morning, I said. The one who asked if it hurt. He almost smiled. I say almost because there wasn't quite enough of it to call it a smile, but the thing that was almost a smile was more interesting than a full one would have been. Reminded me of my brother, he said. He walked back toward the gate. I watched him go. I took the photograph when he was maybe 15 feet away, when he was fully himself again, fully the uniform, fully the monument, fully everything the institution required him to be. The image is perfectly still. But I was there. I know what's inside the stillness. My uncle Rashid used to say that the Ganges doesn't care about your problems. He'd say it whenever someone in our family was being dramatic, which was constantly, because our family treats drama the way other families treat airing necessary, ambient, occasionally suffocating. He'd say it and, then, he'd go back to whatever he was doing, usually drinking tea and reading a newspaper that was 3 days old, as if the delay made the news more reliable. I thought about him when I was standing on the Millennium Bridge in London at 11:15 on a Tuesday night in October, watching the Thames, and thinking about Daniel. The Thames is not the Ganges. The Thames is grey and contained and moves with a kind of British dignity, as if it has places to be but won't be hurried about it. The Ganges, from what I've seen in photographs I've never been, seems to have strong opinions. The Thames seems to have made peace with not having them. I was on the bridge because I couldn't sleep. This is becoming a theme. I am a man who cannot sleep in hotel rooms and apparently also cannot sleep in regular rooms when he has been thinking too much, and I had been thinking too much since my conversation with Daniel that morning, which had lasted maybe 6 minutes and had somehow done more damage to my sense of what my life was than 3 days of supply chain optimization panels. Because the form was there. And I filled it in. I need to tell you something about myself that I don't usually tell people, which is that I have a folder on my laptop called Archive and, inside it is a business plan for a ceramic tile company. This is absurd. I know. I am a logistics coordinator for a pharmaceutical distributor. I do not make tiles. I have never made tiles. The closest I have come to tiles is the bathroom renovation I watched a YouTube series about and, then, did not do, because the YouTube series made it look manageable but the actual tiles in the actual shop made it look expensive. But I had this idea, 2 years ago, that I would make tiles. Not commercially, at first, just for myself. I had this image of a workshop. Not large. Something with a window that gets afternoon light. A wheel, or not a wheel, maybe hand pressing, I'd read about both. The tiles would have specific patterns, I'd sketched some, they're in the folder, geometric with some organic elements, the kind you see sometimes in old Portuguese buildings or certain Moroccan courtyards. I'd looked up suppliers. I'd costed it roughly. I'd even found a workshop space in the part of the city I live in that rents by the month. And then, I didn't do it. Because the quarter-end reports were due, and then, I'd promised to cover for a colleague who was sick, and then, there was a family thing, and then, several months had passed and the tile workshop had become something I thought about the way you think about a film you mean to watch fondly, with good intentions, increasingly abstractly. The folder is still there. Archive. As if the idea itself is something I've decided is finished. A man sat down near me on one of the benches that run along the side of the bridge. Not near enough to be intrusive, there's a London etiquette to these things, but near enough that I was aware of him. He was older. 60s, maybe. White hair, heavy coat, the kind of boots that suggest someone who does actual outdoor things and not just dresses for the concept of them. He had a thermos, which he was unscrewing with the ease of long habit. He glanced at me the way people glance at each other on bridges at 11 at night, a brief scan, the universal check that everything is emotionally intact, the look that says you okay? Without making it weird. I must have looked okay, because he just turned back to the river. Couldn't sleep, he said, to the Thames, but, meaning me. No, I said. Nor me. He poured something from the thermos. Tea, from the smell. 40 years of night shifts'll do that. You get to a certain point and, the body just decides evenings are for being awake. Refuse to be argued with. What did you do? I said. 40 years of what? Structural engineer, he said. Bridges, mostly. Some buildings. He nodded at the river without looking at me. Not this one. But, some. Do you miss it? He considered this with the specific seriousness of someone who takes questions seriously, which I respected. I missed the problem, he said. You get a problem, load distribution, stress point, foundation conditions, and everything else in the world goes quiet because the problem is the world, for that duration. I miss that. He drank his tea. I do not miss the commute. Or the meetings. Or that he waved his hand in a way that communicated a volume of bureaucratic suffering I didn't need spelled out. What do you do now? I asked. Woodworking, he said, immediately. Furniture. I've got a workshop. The garage, basically, my wife would say it's the garage, I would say it's a workshop that happens to have been a garage. A small smile. I've been making it worse for 20 years. Slowly getting less bad. Something twisted in my chest. Not unpleasantly. I had an idea, I said. For something. A workshop, kind of. Different. I stopped. He said. I never did it. He said again. Which is not nothing. It was a very specific sound, the sound of someone who understands exactly what I never did it means without needing it drawn for them. Do you think I started, then stopped, because I didn't know how to finish the sentence without it sounding like the kind of thing people say to strangers on bridges at midnight in films, and I didn't want to be that. I think, he said, slowly, that the reason most people don't do the thing is not fear of failing at it. It's fear of what it means to succeed. He screwed the cap back on his thermos. Because if you succeed at the thing, you have to answer for all the years you didn't try it. He stood up. Tucked the thermos under his arm. Bridge, he said, nodding at me, meaning are you going to be okay? Bridge, I said, meaning yes. He nodded, turned, and walked off in the direction of the south bank with the unhurried walk of a man who knows where he's going and isn't racing anything. I stayed on the bridge for another 20 minutes. The city moved around me, indifferent and beautiful the way large cities are, the way they make you feel small but not unpleasantly so, the way a river makes you feel when you let it. I thought about Daniel. I thought about a man who filled in a form because the form was there. I thought about my uncle Rashid and the Ganges and whether it would care about my problems, and I decided it probably wouldn't, and I decided that was the right answer. I thought about the folder called Archive on my laptop. When I got back to the hotel, at 12-something in the morning, I opened the laptop. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't send emails or sign up for workshops or make declarations to myself in the bathroom mirror. I just opened the folder and looked at the sketches for 20 minutes. The geometric ones. The ones with the organic element in the corner that I'd never quite gotten right but had always found interesting precisely because it wasn't quite right. Then, I closed the laptop and went to sleep. But I moved the folder first. Out of Archive. Onto the desktop. The next morning, the last morning of the conference, I walked a different route to the convention center, down along the embankment, past the river, past the benches where the man with the thermos might have sat last night or might have been a thing that happened to me in a dream. The distinction felt unimportant. I passed a man playing violin near Embankment Station. He was good. Not busking good in the way that means technically proficient and making do genuinely good, the kind of playing that makes you slow down and then stop and then realize you've been standing in the same place for 2 minutes while your coffee gets cold. He finished the piece. Lowered the bow. Looked up. He was maybe my age. 34, 35. He wore a tie loosened, not because he was being casual but because he'd been playing and the heat of it had gotten to him. Like he'd come from somewhere or was going somewhere that required the tie and this was the in-between. I put £5 in the case. He nodded. Then, because I am apparently having a week of approaching strangers, what was that? I said. Elgar, he said. Violin concerto. The slow movement. Do you do this, is this your, he smiled with one side of his face? I'm an accountant, he said. This is Tuesday. He raised the bow again, which was the end of the conversation, which was right. I walked the rest of the way to the conference. Sat through the morning panels. Did not think about supply chain optimization even slightly. At lunch I called my sister, who is the person I call when I am trying to think about something I can't think about directly. I didn't tell her about Daniel or the man with the thermos or the accountant playing Elgar at 9 in the morning on the embankment. I talked around it, the way you talk around a thing. She listened to me talk around it for a while and then, she said, Omar, just do the tile thing. I said, I didn't say anything about tiles. No, she said. But, I know you. The conference ended. I took the tube to Heathrow. I sat in the departure gate for 2 hours eating an overpriced sandwich and, looking at the sketches on my phone, I'd photographed them from my screen, the geometric ones, the one with the imperfect organic corner. There's a different kind of freedom and a different kind of responsibility, and the thing nobody tells you is that they're not actually opposites. They're the same muscle. You have to use one to build the other. You have to give things up to become someone capable of giving things up, which is a sentence that sounds like a riddle and isn't. Daniel gave himself to the form. The form took. And, somewhere inside the giving, inside the stillness that costs something, was still the man who wanted to put his hands in his father's farm. Both things, at once. Not resolved. Not ending. I looked at the organic element in the corner of the sketch. The part that wasn't quite right. I thought, that's actually the best part. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Not email. An actual letter, in an actual envelope, with a handwritten address, which in the current era of human communication is either deeply personal or deeply alarming, and, for the first 2 seconds of holding it I wasn't sure which. It was from Daniel. I don't know how he found my address. I didn't ask him for his, I hadn't given him mine. The only thing I can think is that I'd mentioned, briefly, in that 6-minute conversation outside Buckingham Palace, the name of the company I work for, because he'd asked what the conference was about and I'd answered, and he was apparently the kind of person who, once they decide to do something, actually does it. The letter was 3 pages. Handwritten, which I mention again because it matters. You can feel a handwritten letter in a different way than you feel anything typed. The pressure of the pen. The places where the handwriting gets smaller when the thoughts get harder. I'm not going to reproduce the whole thing here. Some of it isn't mine to share. But, the part one can tell you is this, he'd put in his notice. Not impulsively. Not in the immediate aftermath of our conversation, which I'd been a little worried about. You don't want to be the stranger who tips someone into a life decision they weren't ready for. He'd put it in 6 weeks after we spoke, after what he described as a long think and a longer conversation with my dad. He was going back to Harrogate. To the farm. Not forever, he wrote. I'm not saying forever. I don't know what forever looks like. But, my dad's knee is bad and, the winters up here are a particular kind of brutal and, there's a fence line that's been needing work since September. And, then, near the end of the second page, the sentence that I've read probably 30 times since, I kept thinking about what you said. About the jaw. I didn't even know I was doing it. That's the thing that stayed with me, that I'd been doing something that hard for so long I'd stopped noticing I was doing it. I want to be honest about something. When I read that letter, my first feeling was not pride or satisfaction or any of the clean emotions. My first feeling was something uncomfortable and complicated. Because I was sitting at my desk, in my office, with the quarter-end reports open in another tab, and the tile sketches still on my desktop where I'd moved them in October and where they had remained, untouched, for the 4 months since. I had moved a folder. Daniel had moved his life. These are not the same scale of thing, and the comparison did not flatter me. I thought about it for a week before I wrote back. Long enough that I wondered if he'd think I'd disappeared, short enough that I hadn't done anything yet that would change what I was going to say. When I wrote back, I did it by hand. I don't have nice handwriting, it's the handwriting of a person who uses keyboards, slightly cramped, with letters that don't always connect the way they mean to. But I wrote it out anyway. 3 drafts. The first was too polished. The second too emotional. The third was just true. I told him about the folder. I told him what it was. The tiles, the sketches, the workshop space I'd found and never rented. I told him I hadn't done it, and that reading his letter made me feel the specific discomfort of someone who gives better advice than they take. Then, I told him the other thing. The thing I'd been circling for 4 months, the thing that had come into focus slowly the way cold things come into focus, not in a moment of clarity but in a slow accumulation of smaller moments, until one morning you realize you've been seeing it for a while and have been choosing not to look directly at it. I told him, the reason I never rented the workshop space is not money and not time. It's that if I start, I have to be someone who started. And if I'm someone who started, I have to answer for all the years I was someone who didn't. A structural engineer had said something like this to me on a bridge at midnight in October, and I hadn't known then how much of it I was absorbing. 3 weeks after I sent the letter, my phone rang. Unknown number. Northern area code, which I only recognized because I'd looked it up. Harrogate is in North Yorkshire and the area code is 01423, which I knew because I'd looked it up twice, which tells you something about where my head was. Omar, he said, when I answered. Not a question. Daniel. There was wind on the line. Real, outdoor wind, not the distant air conditioning hum of an office. I could hear something underneath it, something agricultural, something that had a rhythm to it, machinery of some kind, or possibly just the farm doing its farm business. I'm mending the fence, he said. You can do things with your hands while you're on the phone. I don't think that's rude. I don't think that's rude, I confirmed. The knee's getting better, he said. My dad's. He's been doing these physio exercises he hates. He does them every morning in the kitchen while swearing at the radio, which is how I know they're working. I laughed. He laughed. The wind moved over the phone. How's it? I asked. A pause that had several things in it. Hard, he said. Different hard. Not the standing hard. Another pause. I went out in the field yesterday morning at 5:30 because the sheep were off. Something had upset them, turned out to be nothing, just a fox that had passed through, they'd settled themselves. But I was out there in the dark, middle of November, in my dad's old wax jacket, and I could see my breath, and the sheep were just there, doing their thing, not caring about me particularly. And I thought he stopped. What? I said. I thought, this is the most alone I've ever been, he said. And I meant it as a good thing. I sat with that. I rented the workshop, I said. Silence for a second. Yeah, he said. 2 weeks ago. I have it for 3 months to start. I've been in twice. I've made 1 tile. It's terrible. I showed my sister and she said it looked like a biscuit someone had sat on. He laughed again. More fully this time. But, you made it, he said. But, I made it, I said. There's a thing that happens in the workshop that I didn't expect and haven't been able to fully explain to anyone. When I'm in there, when the clay is in my hands and the light is coming through the window and there's nothing asking anything of me except the thing I'm making, time does a different thing. It doesn't go fast in the way people say time goes fast when you're enjoying something. It goes deep. Like a note held long enough that you stop hearing the note and start feeling the space inside it. My tiles are still not good. The third one cracked. The fifth had an air bubble that exploded in the kiln in a way that the woman who runs the pottery supply shop described, cheerfully, as a small but dramatic failure. I have the geometric pattern down for the edges, something like right, but the organic element in the corner, the part that was never quite right in the sketch, continues to be not quite right in the clay, and I keep making it anyway, because I've started to think the not quite rightness is the whole point of it. Responsible for the cracking tile. Free in the room where it happened. Both at once. The same muscle. Daniel sent me a photograph 3 weeks ago. It's not an impressive photograph, technically. The light isn't particularly good. The composition is accidental. It's a picture of a fence post and wire running across a hillside, and beyond the fence there's the slope of a field, and beyond that a gray sky with one thin light stripe of something warmer near the horizon. He's standing beside the fence. You can only see part of him, his shoulder, his arm, his hand on the post. The bearskin hat is nowhere. He's wearing his dad's old waxed jacket, or something like it. You can't see his face. But you can see his hand on the post. It's resting there. Not gripping. Not bracing. Just resting. I have looked at that photograph every day since he sent it. There's a picture on his phone of a man standing completely still. There's a picture on my phone of a man finally, still in a different way. The stillness in the first photograph cost something. The stillness in the second one is what the cost bought. I told my uncle Rashid about Daniel, eventually. Over the phone, in a call that started as a family logistics call and became something else the way those calls sometimes do, late on a Sunday evening when everybody else had gone to bed, and he'd picked up the old phone in the hallway where there was no one to hear. He was quiet for a while when I finished. "The Ganges," he said. "What?" "You know what I always say. The river doesn't care about your problems." "Yes," I said. "But," he said, and he paused in the way he pauses before something true, the pause that has been refined by 68 years of thinking before speaking, that's the point of it. You go to the river not to be heard. You go to be reminded that the world is larger than your problem and that you will survive the problem and also survive being small. He went quiet again. "Your guard," he said. He'd been calling Daniel my guard for 20 minutes, which I found touching. Your guard went to the farm for the same reason. The sheep don't care about his choices. The fence doesn't care. That's not cruelty. That's what he needed. I thought about the hand on the post. Resting, not gripping. And you, my uncle said. You went to the workshop for the same reason. The tiles don't care, I said. The tiles don't care, he confirmed. A long pause. Tell me about the tiles, he said. So I told him about the tiles. About the geometric edges and the organic corner that won't come right and the one that cracked and the one that exploded and the woman at the pottery shop who was cheerful about all of it. About the light that comes through the window at a specific angle in the late afternoon that makes everything look more significant than it is, which maybe means it makes everything look exactly as significant as it is. He listened. He asked 2 questions. He did not tell me it was a good idea or a bad idea or anything in between. He just listened, and I kept talking, and outside his window in his city the Ganges kept going where it was going with its strong opinions and no interest in mine, and outside my window the streets were quiet and the workshop key was on my desk where I could see it. It is a Wednesday in February now. I am going to the workshop this evening after work. I have a new sketch, The Organic Element, drawn again, from a different angle, slightly changed. I think I might have it. I won't know until the clay tells me. Somewhere north of here, a man is mending things with his hands. The sheep are doing their thing. The fence line holds. If you are carrying something you cannot put down, I am not going to tell you to put it down. Some things should be carried. Some things are worth it. But, notice, if you can, whether your jaw is grinding. Because you might have stopped noticing. And, the thing you've stopped noticing might be trying to tell you something.